today, Kona launched this thing. This is their latest bike, the Ouroboros. And we were lucky enough to have the bike for, I'd say, a month or so beforehand. And I put it through its paces, pedaling it more than 300 miles on gravel, single track, and an overnighter. And in this video, I dive into all of the details you need to know about Kona's new drop bar offering. Let's do it. So before we dive into it, I just want to take a quick moment to let everybody know that this video is partially supported by Tailfin. Tailfin designs and engineers technical bike packing equipment for almost any kind of adventure. Innovation and quality are at the heart of what makes them tick, and their constant strive to create better performing gear means that you can just focus on enjoying the ride. They offer a range of options from hauling your gear, whether you're taking on the Tour Divide or just escaping for an overnighter. So for more on Tailfin, be sure to click on the card in the top right corner. You can also follow the link in the description below. With the release of the Ouroboros, Kona isn't attempting to redefine cross-country mountain biking or gravel riding. Instead, they're paying tribute to both disciplines by creating a machine that navigates a path kind of intersecting the two. I think I and many of you have encountered that argument of gravel bikes simply being reminiscent of mountain bikes from the late 80s and early 90s. Well, I understand this perspective. It's essential to recognize that geometry trends are cyclical. Hence the name Ouroboros, an ancient Egypt symbol depicting a serpent or a dragon eating its own tail, representing an eternal cycle of renewal. The Ouroboros is indeed building upon past designs, aiming for improvement rather than reproduction. This iterative process isn't just found in cycling, but also in other creative fields such as music, be it in inspiration for the artist, or as I was sitting down writing this script, listening to 90s alternative playlists, bringing me back to my childhood and early teens, reminding me of how that time shaped who I am today. Embracing this ethos fosters innovation and evolution within the cycling community. And as we move along into this review, you will be reminded of the past, but also introduced to the present. So before we dive into anything else, it is appropriate to kind of bring up Kona's sizing, which to me has always been something that requires careful consideration. So despite the blurred lines of the mountain and gravel Ouroboros, Kona decided to stick with the metric sizing in centimeters. The bike comes in 6 sizes from 48 centimeters to 58 centimeters. I'm 5'9.5" or 176 centimeters, and I ended up testing the 54 centimeter size. The fit was great, and I've actually pedaled a 56 from Kona before, and while it worked, I told myself the next time I wanted to test one of their bikes, it would be a 54, and I'm happy I did. 395 millimeter reach isn't exceptionally long, but it does start to kind of blur the lines away from standard gravel geometry we've gotten to know over the last few years. The big standout number to me, however, is that 610 millimeter stack height, which was evident on my first ride. This bike is very upright, which is on trend for all of Kona's drop bar bikes. So in 2018, Kona launched the Libre and redesigned their major Jake, marking their initial jump into the realm of carbon drop bar bikes. But Kona is, of course, no stranger to carbon, using it on all of their full suspension mountain bikes. And despite the high praise of their steel rigs, Kona reaches more customers with their diverse range of bikes, carbon, steel, and aluminum. The Ouroboros is especially intriguing as the frame is ISO 4210 mountain tested, a departure from conventional road standards commonly found in many gravel bikes. And while Kona offers one aluminum Ouroboros build, the carbon mold certainly reduces weight dramatically over their steel bikes, such as the Sutra LTD, with the Ouroboros 54 centimeter coming in at 23 pounds 6 ounces or 10.6 kilograms. As you see here, the Ouroboros has a suspension fork, and well, it was designed around a suspension fork, which is certainly a departure from Kona's other drop bar bikes. And when you kind of zoom in on the frame and fork alone, the bike gives off a distinct mountain bike vibe. Despite the suspension corrected frame, Kona also spec'd 2 builds with a 420 millimeter axle to crown carbon fork with 29 by 2.5 inch tire clearance. However, you are stuck with 2.1 inch tire clearance on the rear end and a 50 millimeter tire clearance on the front if you do go with those two spec builds with the RockShox or Fox gravel forks. So the build does come with non-boost, so 142 in the rear, 100 front, by 12 axle spacing, and a press fit 86.5 millimeter bottom bracket. Kona says this allows for increased tire clearance and simple tube-in-tube cable routing. But that begs the question, why not just go with the press fit BB92 and stretch that tire clearance at the rear end to 2.4 inches. I'm sure Kona thought through this, as this route opens up a whole can of worms, such as road boost, the lack of gravel suspension forks in that axle size, chain ring, chain line, max chain ring size, extra weight, and overall geometry changes. So they kept it simple and used what they've done in the past with their other bikes. While there is no doubt that this is a gravel bike simply based on the tire clearance, it is hard to ignore the mountain bike specs, such as that 31.6 millimeter seat post diameter, SRAM's universal derailleur hanger, and 180 millimeter rotors, both front and rear, although with calipers of the flat mount variety. In general, I get many old and new school vibes from these frame highlights, and well, plenty of gravel and mountain bike vibes. All right, so going back to the Sutra LTD, the Ouroboros certainly took some inspiration from that bike, not only with an identical 69.5 degree head tube angle, 73.5 degree seat tube angle, but also identical wheelbase at 1,094 millimeters, and the identical chainstay length, with the Ouroboros coming in at 445 millimeters. The reach measurements are identical, and the stack heights are very similar throughout the range of sizes. While the two bikes are very similar in geometry, they differ based on one being suspension corrected and one being built around a rigid fork, as well as frame material, which showed while out riding. I spent a little over a month on the Ouroboros, and while that's not super long, I've managed to put 300 plus miles on it, and it accompanied me on some shorter and longer day rides, a 100-mile overnighter, and short single-track jaunts. Still, while I think having long-term reviews of a bike are very important, it's really hard to ignore first impressions. And on my first ride, it felt very comfortable and grounded while offering the quickness that you would expect from a carbon gravel bike. So while you may argue that this is simply just a carbon Sutra LTD, at least according to the numbers, the carbon frame kind of breathes new life into this geometry. It's much stiffer than the Sutra LTD. And in fact, my initial impressions of this bike gave me some serious Salsa Cutthroat vibes. It's a fast and comfortable bike, but after I pedaled the Cutthroat again to compare, the Cutthroat's shorter reach and taller stack raised the torso more than the Ouroboros. Either way, both bikes are very upright and took some getting used to again, which is likely due from me testing a variety of different bikes with shorter stacks, such as the Santa Cruz Stigmata and that Pipe Dream Sirius S6. While I appreciate high stacks from time to time on bikes like the Ouroboros, more comfort, I did also notice that it lacked confidence in gravel descending, mostly while I was cornering. While the Ouroboros is not a race bike like the Stigmata, it's also not sluggish by any means. In fact, I used the term sluggish in my Sutra ULTD review a few years back, and I wouldn't even begin to use the same language to explain the Ouroboros. And I think the carbon frame has a lot to do with it. It's less mass to move forward, but offers better energy transfer from pedals to wheels. It was a joy to pedal up long climbs, and it had a sense of urgency to get you to the top. Having the ability to put 2.1-inch tires on the back end and say a 2.3 up front with a carbon fork would allow certainly lower tire pressures and more overall comfort, especially the rear end of it, which from time to time kind of rattled me around a little bit on some chunky roads or washboards. However, the 40mm RockShox Rudy up front kind of acted as a wider front tire and did a decent job over washboards and allowing for loads of playfulness. The 40mm of suspension up front combined with that longer wheelbase and reach and shorter 60mm stem had me preloading the shock to pop up obstacles, pumping through single track rollers, cornering with more confidence, and with the overall geometry putting me in a good position on climbs. It also allowed me to descend with confidence, especially when I dropped that 125mm access reverb dropper post. The more rough the terrain got as far as going downhill, it kind of opened up a different type of bike. It really didn't mind getting air off little ledges and didn't hesitate with small drops. I felt surprisingly confident on this bike while riding single track, and I even tested its limits from time to time, finding that it wasn't all that much slower than riding a hardtail, and in fact was much faster on smooth single track climbs. Overall, this bike does many things well, but single track definitely being one of them. Loading up the Ouroboros was a joy. The stiffer rear end flexed a little bit more with that weight, allowing a little bit more compliance over some chunky bits of the Kokopelli Trail. Maybe plusher is a better way to discern the difference between loaded and unloaded on the Ouroboros. It also pedaled very well through some ledgy portions with minimal pedal strikes thanks to the higher bottom bracket, even with that 172.5mm force crank arms. So in typical Kona fashion, the Ouroboros has loads of bikepacking provisions. Front rack/fender mounts, plus 3-pack mounts and dynamo routing on their carbon fork, and rear fender mounts and ample mounts inside the frame for bottles or to mount a custom frame bag to, or to kind of mix and match as I did here. However, they opted for no down tube mounts or rear rack mounts, which I would have used if they were there. And while you can notice a little bit of a sloping top tube here, there still is ample frame space. It is worth mentioning that Kona also installed mounts on the top tube for top tube bags, but they are drilled, I'd say, a little bit too far back, kind of making it look a little strange when top tube bags are installed. That said, there is zero interference between the top tube bag and stem if that is what they were going for. And while I really did enjoy that 40mm of suspension up front, the downside to the Rudy Ultimate Fork is that it doesn't have any mounts associated with it. And while I did plan on using the Old Man Mountain fork racks, they didn't show up on time for my bikepacking trip. Overall, the carbon fork certainly offers a little bit more versatility for gear. Finally, the bike is spec'd with a 48cm Ritchey VentureMax handlebar. It's a bar that I spent loads of time with and certainly one of my favorites. With the bar's kind of flat top and relatively high stack, I found myself kind of leaning on my forearms to kind of change up hand positions. And the wider bar certainly offers a little bit more space and clearance for bike luggage or on-bar accessories. And it just feels really great while riding. When I got Kona's Supreme Ouroboros build, which is their high-end build, it was really hard not to notice their mountain-centric componentry. So first off, Kona nixed the derailleur hanger that they used on the Sutra, which Logan and I both had mentioned was relatively soft, in place of SRAM's universal derailleur hanger. The bike has a 47.5mm chain line, which works with most modern day gravel group sets, yet Kona had different thoughts, going with EXO transmission and a SRAM force crankset. The gearing was adequate, and I didn't actually find myself hunting for more lower gears too much, but if you plan on riding super steep trails or say with a heavier load, consider stepping down to a smaller chainring. I only felt the need on some pretty steep single track climbs. So I also felt really anchored into these force levers. I've used them now on multiple occasions, and I really just enjoy that large hood and the simplicity of just a single left and right paddle to shift up or down the cogs. So the bike also comes with a 125mm reverb access dropper, which can be actuated by simultaneously pressing the left and right paddles on the levers. And speaking of levers, the bike comes with 180mm rotors, which adds a lot to this bike. While the Force 2-piston brakes are nothing to write home about, the larger 180mm rotors certainly give some more bite, which certainly allows more overall descending confidence, just knowing that I could slow down quickly. The new Zip Explorer 101 wheels come with a 27mm internal rim width with Moto Tech, a single-walled approach to the rim, which is said to offer more traction in rough corners and a smoother ride in rockier terrain with less chance of pinch flatting. Paired with some Maxxis 50mm Ravager tires, I actually felt like this might have been the most inspiring wheel combo you can get for a gravel bike. And while they don't roll all that well compared to some other gravel tires out there, it certainly offers decent amount of cornering confidence and stopping power, which I think is more important, especially with a loaded bike. So while the Ouroboros and 90s mountain bikes certainly have apparent similarities, like the overall length of the bikes, the similar head tubes and seat tube angles, the Ouroboros certainly offers modern touches to make it all the more inspiring. It's a comfortable bike for all-day riding, but has an edge that lends to a certain quick nature that you don't find with, say, their Sutra LTD. Add in a variety of fun bike packing features and unique set of build options, Kona has checked a lot of boxes that today's adventure rider would certainly have in mind. A go-far, multi-purpose bike with some modern touches. So I was born in 1987, so I'm certainly a sucker for that 90s kind of alternative rock, that edgy grunge-like tone of that era. That kind of actually defines the Ouroboros well. It can do everything you would expect, but it has that attitude to kind of push the boundaries and do so with conviction. Kona has yet to announce the availability or actual pricing, but they are offering 4 different builds. This dark blue Supreme build with their higher end components, a beautiful light blue offering with a rival 2x, an Apex 1 mechanical build with Fox suspension fork, and a 6061 aluminum butted sage green build with micro shift components. So what do you think about Kona's new Ouroboros? Let me know in the comment section below. And if you like what you saw in this video and want to see more like it, please hit that subscribe button and notification bell. And if you want to help support us a little bit more, you can do so by signing up for the Bikepacking Collective. The Bikepacking Collective offers a lot of awesome perks, including industry discounts, monthly giveaways, and the twice yearly Bikepacking Journal. The deadline to sign up to receive the 12th edition of the Bikepacking Journal is today, so don't delay. You can find more details by clicking on the card in the top right corner or following the link in the description below. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, pedal further.